10 times a charm, right Disney? Disney have released yet another live-action remake of one of their beloved animated classics. And in this video, we are going to see if they actually managed to beat the animated movie this time around. Okay, we know that isn't gonna happen. Well, at the very least, let's be lenient towards Disney this time, shall we? Because I'm feeling in a good mood, let's lower the bar for Disney in this versus video. If the Little Mermaid remake can win just one of the 5 rounds in this versus video, we will give them a pat on the back and call it a success. Even if the box office doesn't think so.
Yes! Thank you.
Alright, time to get serious. 1 round, Disney. That's all you need to win. Let the battle commence. Now, right from the beginning, the acting in the remake felt like a stage play, and much like the other Disney remakes, despite having a longer runtime than the original, the pacing still feels like it's on fast forward. Additionally, the movie has a ton of extra scenes, including additional song numbers, and they have so many problems that I could spend hours talking about what they got wrong. Meanwhile, the animated movie is very tight and has a runtime of 1 hour and 23 minutes, and it absolutely flies by, especially if you watch it after the much longer remake. In addition to problematic pacing, the tone and tension is also wrong. For example, this whole sequence is far more intimidating and intense in the animated movie, and it's even more intense when you see Sebastian and Flounder carry Ariel up, not just for her benefit because she can't swim with her new legs, but also because they are terrified and want to get the hell out of there. It adds even more layers of terror and urgency to this scene, but you don't get any of that in the remake. In fact, Ariel somehow swims up all by herself despite having just gotten her legs. She somehow immediately knows how to use them because, you know, she's a strong female character. In the animated movie, she's not used to her legs and has to adjust. In fact, she can't even swim by the end of the movie and needs help from Flounder in the film's climax, hence giving the side character some use. In the remake, you guessed it, she swims to the ship all by herself, which gives Flounder one less thing to do. But we'll talk more about that in the characters segment. Now let's talk about the core of the story, that being the love story between Ariel and Eric. Now, one of the complaints with the original Little Mermaid is that Eric and Ariel fall in love way too quickly, and I would be lying if I said I didn't notice that myself when I was a kid. Now, in the remake, they tried to flesh out the relationship and give them more time to like each other, and I thought some of those scenes were actually pretty good, especially with the way she breaks some of his ocean findings, such as a rock, and inside is a gem. That was actually the one thing that I genuinely liked in this movie. In the end though, these additional scenes in the remake are ultimately pointless, because in the animated movie, their road to falling in love may have been quick, but the movie made its point well enough and you understood where the characters were, and due to it being a fairy tale, you were able to just go with it. The remake gives them more scenes to get to know each other, but you don't buy that the two are really in love. Ariel seems more in love with being on land than she does with Eric. Their romance feels like it's not in focus, most likely because the movie doesn't want to preach a girl who wants a man so badly, even though that's the whole point of a romantic fairy tale, that the couple want to be together, especially in Ariel's case, but the remake seems like it's vehemently against that message, even though this whole story revolves around it, and it results in a romantic movie that does not want to fully commit to its romance, and that makes the moments of heartbreak feel weightless and emotionless, because live-action Ariel is just not into Eric that much, so who cares if he's going to marry someone else? The animated movie, on the other hand, is not conflicted and fully embraces its romantic story. Ariel is clearly so in love with Eric that when the heartbreak happens, you really feel it, and you feel bad for her. I did not feel any shred of sadness for her in the remake, and that is down to the scaled back romance, which is most definitely down to not wanting to upset feminist social issues, at which point why did they even bother remaking this movie in the first place, and the lack of chemistry between the two actors. A criticism that is often harbored at The Little Mermaid is that the romance between Eric and Ariel is very quick, and the two characters fall in love very quickly, but it is an olden fairy tale, so it's not something that I can really criticize as it's a basic love story, and I thought it did the job well enough. And I feel like the movie knows that, and it takes full advantage of it. And I thought it did the job well enough to the point that I was rooting for the two characters to get together. So in the remake, the tone is inferior, the pacing, the tension, and of course, the story itself is also inferior. So the movie with the superior story and love story is the animated Little Mermaid. Now, Ariel in the original animated movie was so full of life and was constantly reacting to everything around her for the first time with such a childlike excitement. The movie wasn't afraid of having her make a fool of herself, she had a nice personality, she interacted with the side characters in a way that made them likable, and her reactions with all the characters around her, as well as the way she presented herself, made her a character that you very much rooted for. Now, I'm glad to say that in the remake, Halle Bailey is not as bad as the trailers showed. Having said that, she isn't good. I personally think that she needs some serious acting lessons because her performance came across as something you would expect in a Broadway play rather than a movie. When she's talking for the first half of the movie, her line reads sound unnatural, like she's memorizing and regurgitating her lines, but she doesn't believe in what she's saying. This makes her performance whenever she's talking with her father or having conversations with Flounder, Sebastian, and Scuttle sound fake and disingenuous. And for the second half of the movie where she loses her voice, she is supposed to act with her facial expressions and body language, and for the most part, she keeps giving these very stiff and blank stares. It's like she doesn't know what face to make. There are countless movies where actors do a lot with minimal dialogue and tons of facial expressions, and hiring an actress that can take advantage of that was imperative for a role like this. And unfortunately, Halle Bailey doesn't have what it takes. Not to mention that the big emotional set pieces that Ariel had to go through, in the remake not only were they poorly acted and directed, but the line reads from all the actors, including the great Javier Bardem, were so dull and lifeless that the emotional set pieces ended up feeling completely weightless and had no impact. There is just no urgency or emotion when Ariel talks to King Triton like there was in the animated movie. In the remake, when he finds out that she had an encounter with a shark, he is so laid back about it. And when she swims away, he says to Sebastian, "Was I too hard on her?" And I was like, what? No one would ever think you were too hard on her. If anything, you were so bloody laid back. The animated King Triton, on the other hand, was hard on her. Hence he asked, "Was I too hard on her?" The dialogue and the script actually meant something, whereas in the remake it's just being regurgitated, but with none of the purpose of the animated movie. And then of course you get the big scene where he destroys all of her possessions. It was painful and brutal to watch in the original, especially when he destroyed the last thing that was precious to her. And he didn't take glee in being cruel, Triton was actually hurt by having to teach her such a harsh lesson. But in the remake, it happened so fast like the actors had rehearsed it and just went through the motions quickly so they could break for lunch. And as a direct result, the scene had no natural build-up or impact. It didn't feel like a lesson was being taught as much as a checkbox had been ticked. This scene in the remake is the perfect example of how these Disney remakes have no care or love for these animated classics and how they are just rushed out the door. And whereas the animated movie would use scenes like this to take your investment to a whole other level, the remake just loses you even more. And I don't understand how they keep messing these scenes up, because the hard work is already done for them. They just have to copy the animated movie, and if they still can't make these iconic set pieces any good, then what chance does the rest of the movie have? So I thought the remake did a very poor job at adapting the character of Ariel and trying to get us emotionally invested into her story. And it doesn't help that they keep trying to give Ariel extra achievements, some of which that are entirely pointless, like when she helped Max the dog swim to a rowboat that was only 2 feet away, and others that completely undermine the contributions of side characters like Sebastian, Flounder, and Eric. It's amazing how they give Ariel more accomplishments in this movie, yet she is significantly less interesting. And the lack of giving her any true struggle in the movie, and instead having her fix everything by herself with next to zero help from her friends, just made her, in many ways, Hollywood's favorite stereotype, the strong female character. Although she is far from the worst offender of this, she still falls under that category, and it resulted in the lovable side characters becoming pointless. But we'll talk about that in a second. So the movie with the superior interpretation of Ariel is the animated movie. Let's start with King Triton. Now in the animated movie, King Triton is a loving father who cares about the safety of Ariel, and he finds her gravitation towards humans very worrying as they are not kind to the ocean and its inhabitants. And this results in him having to get more strict with Ariel to the point that he has to teach her a hard lesson. And the movie makes sure to show that it gives him no happiness to do this, and he even shows regret later in a brief but very effective scene. And in the remake, he is played by the incredibly talented Javier Bardem. Now whereas he was a very strict parental figure in the animated animated movie, in the remake, it feels like Javier Bardem just couldn't be bothered to act. It's like he knew what kind of crappy movie he was in and he decided to use it to get a quick paycheck. And you could kind of tell because everything he does and says is done with little to no emotion and just no effort. And the worst offender of all is that King Triton was completely forgettable, which is something that you will hear a lot about this movie and his characters. And when Triton says to Sebastian, "Have you noticed Ariel has been acting different lately?" I was like, no. In the animated version she was, and her sisters said it was due to a boy, but in the live action version, she wasn't. She was just talking about how humans are not our enemies like she always does, and suddenly Triton thinks that she's acting differently, and her sisters are like, it's most likely because of a boy. Much like the other remakes, the scenes that it tries to copy just seem very weird and off. And it's because of such bizarre scenes like this that I didn't even buy their relationship as father and daughter. So King Triton was bad. Next up we have Sebastian. Now Sebastian is King Triton's right-hand man. Even so, he still has nice and heartwarming scenes with Ariel, and he even decides not to tell her father that she took a deal with Ursula because he knows that she will be miserable if she goes back home. And there are several of these tender moments between the two where you see them becoming closer friends rather than him just being her father's right hand. And Samuel E. Wright, who does his voice, does such a fantastic job with mixing Sebastian's rapid dialogue with comedy and a ton of different expressions, and he even has a wonderful singing voice too. Now in the remake, Sebastian is voiced by Daveed Diggs, and I'm not kidding when I say this, but his entire performance as Sebastian is so bad that I actually think he is the worst thing of this entire movie. His entire vocal performance is one note, and whereas Samuel E. Wright had such a range of expressions and would seamlessly transition between them in rapid succession, Diggs reads his dialogue so flat that their conversations don't even sound like conversations. He's just blurting out whatever dialogue he has on the page with no personality or character. Just an accent, and a very stereotypical one at that. And what's worse is that he uses this same voice for the song numbers too, and it is unbelievably bad. And not only is his performance awful, but there is no pacing or emotion to his dialogue, and it's even out of sync with what's going on at times too.
Boy, what a soft shell I'm turning out to be.
Now this line is supposed to be read like Sebastian's exhausted and surrendering, but in the remake, he says it like this: "What a soft shell I'm turning out to be." All the actors in the remake just recite their dialogue from the original without bringing any of the meaning and earnestness to the words. They're not being said the right way, and it makes the conversation sound like unrehearsed script reads, and that is the most prominent with Sebastian. There is not a single good thing I can say about this performance. It is absolutely terrible on every level. And they decided to make him look like a realistic crab, so as well as having no expression in his voice, he had no expression on his face either, even though Sebastian is known for his hilarious reactions throughout the movie. And the scary thing is that apparently Daveed Diggs is going to be cast as the Thing in Marvel's Fantastic Four, and since the Thing is going to be a CGI character, that means that he is going to be doing the voice. Man, that movie is in trouble, and not just because the MCU are slipping. Next up is Flounder, and he also suffers from being made to look realistic. In the animated movie, Flounder is supposed to be a scaredy cat, someone who is freaked out at everything, and the animators gave him a very expressive face so you could see it every single time. But in the remake, just like Sebastian, he has no facial expressions at all. And by making these design choices and depriving these characters of any expression, makes it almost impossible for you to get any attachment to them, or even know what they're thinking. And then we get Scuttle. Now I don't know what the mass opinion is for Scuttle, but he is the comic relief of the movie, and I always found him funny, especially with the lessons he gives to Ariel about the dingle hopper, which leads to one hell of a hilarious scene later. But in the remake, Scuttle is gender bent to a woman. And which woman voices him, you ask? Well, Disney's favorite comedian, of course, Awkwafina.
On a dark desert highway, cool wind in my hair.
Awkwafina is an actress that for some reason Hollywood thinks is very funny, when really, she just makes noise and says a bunch of nonsense. And that's exactly how I would describe her performance as Scuttle, and it was insufferable. Also, Scuttle can breathe and talk underwater in the remake, which I don't even know what to say. I mean, the animated movie didn't even go that far. And Scuttle was also absolutely useless in this movie. Like I said earlier, all these side characters have absolutely no utility. All of their contributions from the animated movie have been removed as Ariel does everything herself, including taking the necklace off of Ursula in the climax, swimming to the surface when she gets her legs for the first time, telling Eric her name. Imagine that, she can't speak and she manages to tell Eric her name. And I thought it was very convenient and forced the way she did it. And of course, Plus, in the remake, Ariel is the one who kills Ursula with the ship, even though she wouldn't know how to operate a ship, let alone how to angle a piece of it as a stabbing weapon. Eric would know how to do an attack like that, but how Ariel did is beyond me. Speaking of which, we have Eric, who, I gotta tell ya, they tried to give him more development and character, but oddly, in doing so, I thought they gave him less character. He just seems like a generic live-action Disney prince. He doesn't stand out or have his own charisma like all the characters did in the original, and he did not at all feel like a true representation of Eric from the animated movie. And Eric's mother, she was so bland, and I didn't buy their relationship one bit either in the remake.
Eric, what are you doing? Grim, I lost her once. I'm not gonna lose her again.
Eric had conviction in the original movie. In the remake, he's just a wimp who looks like he's about to cry or break into song every other minute. And his first meeting with King Triton was very awkward and didn't seem very heartwarming, which is in stark contrast to the animated movie where he bows to King Triton, and Triton acknowledges him. That was such a great way to have them meet. Oh, and Sebastian and Flounder didn't even get to help Eric in the remake like they did in the animated film. The remake just cuts to Ariel redirecting Ursula's blast. Heck, we didn't even get to see their reactions to Ursula getting bigger. All of these little exclusions of their scenes made them not only useless, but it made them completely forgettable and not leave a single impression throughout the entire movie. You'd constantly forget that they are even there. As you can probably tell, I don't like any of the characters in the remake, and that made the movie much harder to sit through. All the characters were involved throughout the animated movie. They all played their part, and they have all earned their place in the carousel of Disney characters. In the remake, they all felt pointless, because Ariel does everything on her own and gives them nothing. And if this is how we were introduced to these characters for the first time, none of them would be as iconic as we know them to be. They would be long forgotten. In such a short amount of time, we see the relationships between Ariel, Flounder, Scuttle, Sebastian, and Triton in the original, but in the remake, it felt like the characters didn't even know each other. The dynamics are just not there. Also, despite being almost an hour longer, Louis is not in the movie. I can go on forever, but I'll stop right here. The movie with the far, far, far superior side characters is the animated movie. Now Ursula is a really devious and cunning villain. She manipulates Ariel and promises her whatever she wants, but rigs the game. And she does this so she can get whatever she wants from Triton and use Ariel as collateral. And Pat Carroll, who voices Ursula, is just soaking it up and being as villainous as possible, and you can tell that she's having an absolute ball. And she has cemented Ursula as one of the great Disney villains. Now I was afraid that Melissa McCarthy was going to do her usual shtick as Ursula, but thankfully she didn't do it much. She is very pulled back here, and she is actually a pretty decent Ursula. The big problem with her, however, is the same problem that we have with all of these remakes. I feel that McCarthy can morph her performance to fit a movie, but again, it feels like a stage play, and her dialogue sounds more like rehearsal takes rather than the actual take. Ursula is also less subtle in the remake, and in her first few appearances, she keeps spelling out her motivations and gives non-stop detailed exposition. And all her dialogue feels like it's just being recited, but not expressed. So whenever she sings or talks to herself or even tries to manipulate Ariel through song, you just don't buy any of it. And the non-caring style of these remakes again completely ruins the iconic scenes of the movie. When she takes Ariel's voice, it's actually a lot creepier in the animated movie than it is in the live-action version. They even cut a ton of the edgier dialogue, most notably in the Poor Unfortunate Souls song. And when Ursula gets mad that she almost lost her bet with Ariel, she says this:
"That was a close one. Too close. The little tramp. Oh, she's better than I thought."
These lines are considered politically incorrect, but shaving those edges off of Ursula made her much less funny, sinister, and memorable. And as well as the stage play acting, this is an additional reason as to why she doesn't compare in the slightest to the original. She's infinitely less memorable, and as soon as you walk out of this movie, you will forget everything about her performance, and just want to go back to Pat Carroll. And as you would expect, the movie with the superior Ursula is the animated movie. Now what The Little Mermaid does better than the other Disney remakes is that the songs did not sound auto-tuned this time. All the vocal performances sounded completely natural and not the least bit computerized. The songs themselves, however, Well, first off, the transitions to the songs were by far worse here than they have been in any other Disney remake, and I cringed every time one started. In the animated movie, the transitions to the songs came across very genuine, but in the live-action remake, it came across very phony every time it happened. And the songs themselves didn't have the soul or the heart of the original, and they weren't preceded with great storytelling or character development either, so their emotional intentions fell flat. None of the vocal performances are better here. They don't have anywhere near the same level of energy and passion. The lyrics have been changed because I guess they were considered offensive. The new songs are forcefully and awkwardly thrown into the movie. Awkwafina has an entire song number that is just doing a comedy routine, which is extremely torturous to listen to.
Remember the swamp? Remember my song in the swamp when I was like, whap, chicka, whap, whap, chicka, whap.
I remember.
Bastion, I got that scuttlebutt.
Hurry up.
You'll be like, what? When I drop that scuttlebutt.
This is the kind of song that you use to torture your enemies, and Disney charged us to see it. And anytime Sebastian sang with his one-note vocal performance and his duet with Awkwafina, it was so hard to listen to. Meanwhile, the songs in the original are just classic songs. Each one is incredibly memorable, well-paced, and as good as Halle Bailey's vocal work is, it still doesn't compare to the songs of the original movie. And the new songs that they created for the remake were completely out of place and felt like they did not belong. So the movie with the far superior songs is the original animated movie. So, it seems that the remake couldn't even win one round. In the end, this is yet another Disney remake that gets everything wrong. The story is wrong, the characters are wrong, the direction is wrong, the acting is wrong, the line delivery is wrong. I mean, they had the animated movie available as reference and they still got the line reads wrong. And not to mention the subpar CGI. The water effects aren't as bad as Black Panther Wakanda Forever, but they're nowhere near as good as Aquaman or Avatar The Way of Water. It mostly looks unnatural when they swim around and float in water, and even the floaty CGI hair looks off. There are times where it flows and there are other times when it's clearly not in sync with the way the characters are swimming. Also, Scuttle can breathe underwater in the remake. Somehow. They try to make Sebastian and Flounder look more realistic, yet they decided that Scuttle can breathe underwater. Oh, Disney. It's no wonder you're looking to sell Lucasfilm off to make some more money back. Also, the remake seems to operate on the assumption that Ariel just wanted Eric and that's it, so is constantly trying to combat that message. But really, if they rewatched the animated movie, she already had a fascination with the surface and the ways humans lived. She came across Eric later, and that just sealed the deal that she wanted to marry and have a life with him, rather than a merman under the sea.
Under the sea.
Yeah, whatever. The only complaint I have with the animated movie is that Ariel didn't get to take an additional hit at Ursula before Prince Eric delivers the final blow. And in general, as good as the climax is, it's far too short and I would have liked it to go on a bit longer. But on the whole, the animated Little Mermaid really is one of the classic Disney animated movies that started a new era of Disney, and they were at the top of their game. It's time for the scores. For the longest time, I have given The Little Mermaid an 8 or a 9 out of 10, but because the remake is just so incompetent and shit, it made me appreciate the animated movie that much more. And thanks to the remake, the original Little Mermaid now gets a 10 out of 10, and the live-action remake gets a 2. To me, this is just as bad as the other Disney remakes, and it was so cringeworthy to watch. Throughout the original movie, Ariel had to make several efforts to try. In the remake, however, Ariel is so relaxed about everything and seamlessly gets results during the love story all by herself. And the whole pointless addition of having Ursula rid Ariel's memory of having to kiss the prince to win the deal, that just took the struggle away from Ariel trying to achieve her goal and just made her overly calm throughout the course of the movie. And if she doesn't have to struggle to accomplish her goal, then you really just can't root for her. You could just tell that too many edges were smoothed out to not offend anyone. And even if they are not immediately apparent, you can just tell that everything has been diluted. Also, Eric being hypnotized by Ursula in the remake, in the animated movie they made it very clear that he was being hypnotized. In the remake, they say that he was being hypnotized, but the movie did a terrible job at illustrating that. And they didn't give him a moment like the animated movie did to show that he snapped out of Ursula's trance. And the race bending has led to a lot of discussions regarding how racist audiences are, even though they went in droves the very next week to see Across the Spider-Verse, which as a matter of fact, had far more diversity than this movie did. So the truth of the matter is, if Disney is trying to bank on people's nostalgia, then part of nostalgia is that you keep everything as accurate to their childhood as possible, with some smart changes incorporated, but only if creatively necessary. But it's apparently clear that Disney just wanted to get another pat on the back for their forced diversity, and people could see that coming a mile away. And well, that and the increasing lack of quality content has led domestic and especially international audiences to reject this movie. Really, the international box office for this movie is horrifyingly low, and with the recent release of Across the Spider-Verse, this proves that it's not racism that was the failure of this movie, but the low quality, lack of originality, and blatantly lazy diversity that Disney is looking to be rewarded for. And audiences were not having it. What else can I say except they sure did make it to the bottom of the sea with this one. Hi everyone, it's Eric, and I would just like to take the opportunity to thank my patrons. I really appreciate the support, and as I have previously stated, I am working to relaunch my Patreon with new shows as well as surveys which will allow you, the viewer, to take part in future Versus videos. If you want to start supporting me now, you can, and will be automatically awarded the new perks once they go live. For those of you that can't support me via Patreon, that's fine. Instead, please do consider giving the video a like, a comment, and feel free to share the video on your social media. This is incredibly helpful as it massively helps the video get more reach on YouTube's incredibly unreasonable algorithm, and for those of you that are new to my channel, please do subscribe so you can stay updated with future Versus videos like this one as well as other content. Thanks very much as always for watching everyone. Please do let me know what you thought of the Little Mermaid remake below, and if you want to see just how bad the other Disney remakes are, then click on any one of these videos and you will be amazed at how deep the rabbit hole of shit goes, and I will see all of you very soon. Take care.